It is aeons since I slipped from that supreme self or infinite consciousness. Soon after that fall I was that mendicant who was still endowed with knowledge of the truth. Then, after passing through very many incarnations, through the grace of Rudra, whom I happen to behold, I have become Rudra. When the jiva by coincidence comes into contact with an enlightened person, then its impure vasanas, tendencies, turn away. This happens to that person who constantly longs for such contact with an enlightened person. Such constant longing, or abhyasa, itself materializes and becomes an accomplished fact. The attention can go in one of two directions. It can get caught up with whatever it gets caught up in terms of notions, objects, people, feelings. The attention can go to all of these things, and that's what it becomes. Or it can turn to itself. There's a very strong pull for it to get caught up in objects, the world. We'll just call all the things described there as the world, including our own inner feelings and thoughts, our daydreams. All of that is the world. The attention can get caught up in that, or it can get caught up in itself. This is abhyasa. Abhyasa's whatever the attention is used to getting caught up in, either itself or everything else. And that becomes our reality. Whatever the attention gets caught up in, that's our reality. The word materializes is used if your attention is focused on your beliefs and you try to fit everything which happens into your beliefs, then for you it becomes an accomplished fact. It depends on your vasanas, on your tendencies. If you're not happy with that process, if you see that what the attention normally identifies with is inherently unsatisfactory, then you look for something else. You look for something else for the attention to identify with, usually something which is described by the word spiritual. But usually that involves just subtler levels of ego, in fact more powerful levels of ego, until the attention learns that what it's looking for is itself. The attention can focus on itself, which might not sound very interesting, but when you start to appreciate about what the attention is actually doing, it's the greatest miracle of all. So we need to be aware of this process by which the attention goes from one notion to another. This is what chapter 63 has been about. It's sometimes described as insight meditation. The attention is on itself, but then a short time later it's caught up in some fantasy. How did it get from being on itself to the fantasy? It's like walking down the street. You've got no memory of going from point A to point B. When you practice meditation, this often happens. You sit there with every intention of remaining focused on the object of your meditation, and the next thing you know, you're planning the minutiae of your beach holiday. How did you get there? What was the process which took you from the object of your attention to a total identification with your fantasy? We need to see how we get from there to here. We need to bring it into our awareness. This is the practice. This is what this chapter is about. It's very practical, even though it's expressed in these wonderful terms about supreme yogis who can materialize their thoughts, and the great god Rudra, who was an ancient precursor to the god Shiva. Rudra continued to recollect thus: surely it is because of one's inner conviction, this body is myself, that this unreal perception expands. So this body is myself. This is one of the notions that we identify with. This is one of the notions that we constantly keep coming back to and reinforcing to the extent that it becomes an accomplished fact. If one were to inquire into its true nature, one would find that nothing remained. Enough even of such inquiry which leads to nothing. This world is an optical illusion, like the blueness of the sky. It is ignorance. You come back to yourself. And once you're back to yourself, that's the soul reality. You come back to your attention. It is ignorance. Enough of even this effort to purify that ignorance. If this world appearance, which is unreal, continues to appear, let it. It can do no harm. I shall retrace the chain of imaginary transformations and restore their underlying unity. And this is what Bucknell and Stuart-Fox describe as the insight practice. And it relates to the Buddha's memory of his previous lives. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, he went back through all his previous lives. This was apparently his power. But what he was doing was simply recollecting all that which took him away from his real being. And this is what Rudra is doing. Vasishta continued. Thus having resolved, Rudra went to where the body of the mendicant lay. He awakened it and inspired it to remember all that had taken place. The mendicant saw Rudra as his own self, and also recollected all that had happened. Then both of them went to where Jivata lived in the same infinite consciousness. They revived his body. The three were indeed one. These three, who were wonderstruck at this mystery, then proceeded to the place of the Brahmana, who was asleep embraced by his wife. They awakened his consciousness. Then they went to where the king was, asleep in his royal bedchamber, surrounded by nymphs. They awakened his intelligence too. He too was amazed at the realization of the truth. Thus they went to where the swan lived, the swan that became Rudra. They roamed the world of the 100 Rudras of the past. They realized that it was all one infinite consciousness, in which all these diverse illusory events had apparently taken place. The one form had become many, as it were. These 100 Rudras pervaded the entire universe and were omnipresent. So this is what happens when we move away from our own awareness. First of all, we realize we've moved away from our awareness. We've got caught up in something. We can try and bring it back. But we should try and understand also why we moved away. What was it that led us away? Because it came in sneakily. We didn't notice it. We didn't notice what was leading us away. What was the impulse? What was the feeling? What was the longing that took us away? It's rather like how dreams move from one dream to another. When you're in a dream and you're watching a television program, you get caught up in it just as you do in real life. But in the dream, you become the television program. You actually become a member in the drama that you're observing. And if you're telling a story to somebody in a dream, then that story becomes the next dream. Dreams link into each other like this. And this mendicant his mind was so pure, this was how his awareness worked. He moved completely from one dream to another. And this is how our awareness works, how our attention works. It identifies completely with one thing, and then with another, with another, with another, until we turn it back on itself, and we once again realize our true nature.